Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hello. It's a privilege and an honor to speak at any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Joe, thank you for asking me. Thanks to the group for having me. Here we go again. Stop it. I don't have a Big Book Step Study home group anymore after moving for the 11th time in sobriety. So it's nice to... I'm going to fix it. All right. Nice to be invited back. Step 12. So, where do we begin? Real quick, I came into AA several times. I'm a chronic and acute alcoholic. Do whatever he needs to. Yeah? Okay. And I drank in AA with a sponsor and a home group and a commitment again and again without my own permission. And I heard a lot of the meeting makers make it just coming back and just don't drink no matter what. Unfortunately, my experience is I drink no matter what. So I had a difficult time. My experience is it's difficult to stay sober in a 12-step spiritual program when I was violently anti-religious and did not work the 12 steps. I know, it's rocket science. I had a phenomenal barn, like a white light burning bush experience. I was rendered sober. Didn't choose to get that way. It happened to me, and that's what got me sober. What kept me sober is eventually I ran into a man whose whole deportment shouted that he was a man with a real answer, like the lights were on and somebody was actually home. He's my closest friend, and he recommended I go to the Big Book Step Study meeting in Keene, talk to this guy Bruce who started that meeting, and he could probably help me. And I went there. Bruce carried a message of depth and weight. He knew what he was talking about, so I asked him to take me through the work, and he said he would be honored to do so, and he really meant it. And then I literally said, well, what's next? And Bruce said, well, next I want you to read the doctor's opinion up to page 63, stop while I tell you stop, underline things that are important, significant, circle the words you're not familiar with, look that word up, read the definition in the margin, we're all done, we'll read it together. And I did that, and we're all done, we read it together, and I clearly saw that A, I'm alcoholic and cannot manage my own life, B, that probably no human power can relieve me of my alcoholism, and C, that God could and would if he were sought. I made a decision to do something about it, and I offered myself to God as I then understand him. I don't understand him now, that's perfectly fine. I did a formal third step prayer, and I immediately got up and put pen to paper. I wrote a fourth step. I've been angry and neurotic since birth, and I have a fantastic memory, so it was 2,200 pages long. When I was undone, I read it to my sponsor, and I swallowed many large chunks of truth about myself. It took me 70 hours just to read the thing to him. I went home, I took my hour with God, and I clearly saw I didn't want to be that guy anymore, and I was really willing to do something about it, and I asked the only guy with any power to do so to help me with that. So I did 6 and 7, and I immediately made a list of all persons I had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. I went out and made amends to them all. I made every single one of my 8-step amends that I know of, indirectly or directly. I paid back every single dime. And now what I do on a daily basis, I continue to take personal inventory. I open and close my day with prayer and meditation. I do a nightly review every night. Sponsor a whole bunch of guys in a few different states. I practice these principles in all my affairs, which I don't really do that good a job at, but I work really hard at it. I think that's the point. And and I carried this message, and I don't just do it at meetings. I do it at jails, institutions, detoxes, halfway houses. I speak a lot of conventions, roundups, potlucks, and plain ordinary whoopee parties. And I have a spiritual awakening as the result, and that's what qualifies me to speak at this meeting. So with working with others, the first half is kind of like, well, how do you find one? And the second half is, well, what do you do when you've got one? So I just lost a sponsee. He didn't die. He's like, I can't do this anymore. And whenever that happens, I have yet to have my ego tied or wrapped up around an individual who does me the honor of asking for sponsorship. One or two left me feeling like that guy's, it was once or twice, it felt personal. So it's a little disturbing, but whenever somebody decides not to do this, first of all, most of the time they just disappear. So when anyone actually says, I can't, his words were literally, I can't do this anymore. If they say they don't want to, or they're going to move on, or even if they find another sponsor, it's all well and good. It's not up to me. Whenever they get upset or like, I'm so sorry I wasted your time, they absolutely did not waste my time. I saw the light come back into my sponsor's eyes because I allowed myself to be sponsored. That guy was not doing well. And I don't want to take singular responsibility for saving my life, but if he did not resolutely get back into 10, 11, and to continue to sponsor men, I'm pretty sure he'd be dead. And a lot of people know him. So they never waste my time, and it's not up to me, it's up to God, and what they get out of it is up to them. My job is essentially to give them the instructions as I just broke them down for you. A lot of life events come up as the chapter describes. A lot of conversations will ensue. I try not to exert my will. Sometimes I do. It's very rare. I try not to give my opinion. That comes a little more freely. But I'll usually be good about it and be like, this is my opinion. The best thing I can do is share my experience. Because if they relate to it or not, it's not up to me. All I'm doing is like, well, I had a similar experience. This happened to me. I did this, and it didn't turn out well. Or I did do this, and then she did that, and it worked out just fine. And I have a lot of experience going through this work and taking other men through. So if it's maybe a personal problem, whatnot. A lot of the chapter, or the half of the chapter that we read, talks about spouse, personal problems, like real life stuff, and I just try and share my experience as was shared to me, and direct them to the work, or to their higher power through the work. And I've had a lot of outside experiences that seem to have helped. I had this awesome sponsee. I don't sponsor him anymore. Bruce actually does, because I moved. I currently live in Rhode Island. So if you're scratching your head, it's like, where did I know this peckerhead from? I used to live in Vermont, then I moved to New Hampshire for 3 years, then I was in Massachusetts for 3 years. Now I've been in Rhode Island for 3 years, so I get around. So I moved out of the area, and my sponsor started, helping him to finish the work. And I have his permission to tell this story. I've lovingly never met a more sick alcoholic. And I knew his fiance too. And they would fight like cats and dogs. And I'd see them both at the meeting. And it's really cool because it tells me never to take sides in the domestic situation. And I never did. Like, I was rooting for this guy because I just wanted him to get well, and he has. And that relationship didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. But I never had to take a vested interest in it working out. I only had to take a vested interest. I was a stance for him finishing this work and building a relationship with a God of his understanding. And he's done that. And I like to tell him that he's come so, whenever I see him. And it's beautiful. He sponsors other guys. His sponsees sponsor other guys. And this was the sickest man I have ever met. Lovingly, I say that. So it really is crazy how it's just words on a page. Yet if I follow them, miracles happen. And every now and then I'll talk to Bruce about this kid, and if we ever need evidence of that this stuff works and that miracles happen, we'll just talk about him. I'm a corrections guy, I don't currently have a corrections commitment, but when I was in Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Mass, Vermont, and New Hampshire, I held various commitments in correctional facilities, usually jails. I've only been to a prison once or twice. Jail, there's a lot of, help me with this word, recidivism, when they come back. That, thank you, Mr. Wordsmith. And there's just an incredible amount. And what's cool is I would, be in a meeting and, the guys would come in and then this guy wasn't there for a few weeks and lo and behold, he'd come back. And we would talk, but especially in New Hampshire, I got to run the show. I could have any kind of meeting I wanted, and I like to run the show. And we would have a big book meeting. We would almost always read. We would do Bill's story, but a lot of times we'd do Dr. Pin, and we'd do more about alcoholism because a lot of the guys had no idea why they kept coming back to jail and why they couldn't just stop, or why can't I just go to a couple meetings and just straighten up. And the conversations that we would have after that is like, well, as soon as I get out, they've got to get the girl back. They've got to get that job. I'm not working at Dunkin' Donuts again. Whatever it was, and on and on and on. And it's my job to burn into their consciousness that they can get well, regardless of anyone or anything. Job or no job, wife or no wife, boyfriend or girlfriend, any of those circumstances, we simply do not get well when we place our reliance and dependence upon those things. And, it's easy for me to say, because at the end of the meeting I go home, and at the time I would, get in my car, drive to my house with my then girlfriend, living a free and open life. But what I would tell them is how I got there is not by putting my dependence upon people and things or a job or my bank account. It just doesn't work that way. When I was in Massachusetts, I lived in Quincy for a year, Braintree for 2.5, and there's a lot of sober living. I mean, Boston is obviously a well-populated area, but there's a lot of what we call structured sober houses. So they make you get a sponsor and go through the 12 steps. Otherwise, you can't stay there. And it's got to be out of the big book, usually. And I would speak at these at least once a month, usually a few times a month. And so I would, get to know some of them were co-ed, but most of them were guys. And I would get to know them pretty well. And, see them in meetings, see the lights start to come on. And they would start to get like a real life or their old life back, many blessings. And I would talk about this a lot because what would happen often, not always, it's not up to me, it's up to God, but what I would see an awful lot is things would start to go really well, make even a little bit more money, then they get a car, and they get the girl or the girl back, or, things would go well, then, they're not really making so many amends anymore. Because they make you go through, they'll churn and burn. They get through a similar style, maybe it's not Big Book Step Study, but, a pretty thorough 4-step in, a couple months, because they just sit around and write all the time. But, after, getting well and out there, they get a job or, all of a sudden, making money and the car and the girl are more important. The meetings, not so much. Sponsees, well, I've got a couple, but they're a name only. Not really making amends. So I call all these things the cash and prizes. Whether it's the perfect tan or that gym routine with the 6-pack abs or the the bank account, whatever it is, that thing that's going to make me feel better inside, and I start to pursue that. The only thing is, if I go after those things and I make that how I feel okay inside, with or without my knowledge, I've made that thing my higher power. And I tell them this. They go and do it anyway, but we have the conversation. I get that little soapbox. The problem with, and it's very human. there's nothing wrong to want good things for yourself in your life. I tell them I want them to want it. What I see the crux of the problem is when they make that paramount, that one thing, if I get this, then I'm going to be okay. The problem is they get this, and it only lasts for a little while. And then they got to go to the next thing, or, a different girl, or my job, sucks, they're not paying me, I got to go to a better job. Or that guy's got a nicer car than me, or, the guy's twice my size, I got to go to the gym more, and on and on and on. The problem with the cash and prizes, the shine always wears off. It's just never enough. It just does not fill that God-sized hole. And, when I get sober, there's a big gaping void, and I need to fill it with something. And, that's why I jumped into the work, and I'm certainly not perfect at it. We can talk about my life in a few minutes. But it's just never enough. God's shine does not wear off. It doesn't ever fade. It doesn't lose its luster. It doesn't wax nor wane. And so I encourage them, and this is what I try imperfectly, try to do myself, is if I seek that, basically through the solution out of this book, then everything tends to work out okay. And it talks about that. These are the 12-step promises. So both you and the new man, so I have to do this too, on a daily basis, must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. So that's always the goal, is to continue to progress. Believe me, there's been a lot of hills and valleys. I could talk about the last 3 years with a little bit of humility, shame, and even a tiny bit of regret, to be honest. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. We'll look back and realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power in you presently. That means any time in the future. It doesn't actually mean in the present. It's an old dated term. Presently, live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. And looking back, that's exactly been my case. The jobs that I didn't get, the relationships that didn't work out, even the housing situations. When I follow God's will, things they definitely don't look like I want them to. But they tend to work out, and it's a lot like sailing. You can try and sail against the wind, and you say, I'm going this way. You're just probably not going to get very far, and it's not going to work out very well. And that's why that's why I pray and I meditate. I'm hoping to, figure out which way to go. I've had to bury a bunch of sponsees. I guess it's a little selfish for me to say. Luckily, none of them that I was super close with or had sponsored for years and years. A lot of the guys just drop off. I sponsor guys up in New Hampshire, and it's all the rage to smoke the green or to microdose. That may work out for some people. I don't know. I'm not God, but I've seen a lot of people go off the wayside as a result of that as too. And all I can do is continue to pray for them, and I stick to what I know works for me. And what I know works for me is the 12-step solution outlined in this book. And that's the message I carry to them. And once I start working with them, that's what I got. I want to touch very briefly. There's several pages in the chapter dedicated to more or less dispelling old misnomers that I should stay away from alcohol if I want to stay sober. I can happily report that is absolutely true, what it says in the book. I'm a regional sales manager, so I just met my new boss. We're in New York City for a fancy food show. I had to meet up with him dinner. It's one-on-one. I walk in, he's at the bar. It doesn't bother me at all. I know I'm going to have to tell him, I don't drink, because he's about to ask me, what are you having? I sat down at my bar stool. What did he say? What are you having? I was like, actually, I don't drink. I was like, okay. It's really not that big a deal. I guess maybe a couple of times, but it really, most people don't care. And I've had plenty of bosses in the similar circumstances. I've explained to them I don't drink, and maybe told them I'm sober, I can't do that. They'll forget. They'll ask me again. It's fine. I even have a moonlighting gig just in the summertime down in Newport, and I'm a server in a fancy restaurant, and it doesn't bother me at all. Sometimes I'll even bartend, and it's not to brag, because if I got cocky, I'd probably be in a pretty dangerous situation. It doesn't bother me, because I'm there to do a purpose. You can make a lot of tips when you're selling one glass of wine for $36. It's like, who does that? It's ridiculous. Champagne is $36. It's like 4 ounces. I have been placed in a position of neutrality, and I'm a drug addict as well. I won't get into it too much, but the same thing has occurred to me for other substances. Both my parents had their knees replaced, a hip replaced, and I even helped dispense some painkillers here and there, and it didn't faze me at all. And I literally, one time I stole every single pain pill from my dad after he had surgery on his hands. I gave him one, and then I replaced, this is not funny, but it's kind of funny now. I replaced all of them with Tylenol, and he never took another one after because it made him really drowsy. But it's just the exact opposite situation. And I didn't even live with them. I was just there helping. So there's a lot of benefits that result from having a spiritual awakening as the result of these 12 steps. The last 3 years have been tough, difficult, and one of the best things that because I don't have time to go to a lot of meetings anymore. I have 3 jobs and 2 small children, 2 toddlers, and I'm now divorced. So time is limited. So I definitely was able to fill my spiritual cup by sponsoring other men and taking them through the work. It's probably one of the few things that has kept me sane. So right before COVID, I moved to Rhode Island. I bought a house that is older than George Washington, and so obviously it needed some fix-ups, and then COVID hit, and I'm in food sales, so I was working 18-hour days. My son was born 5 days before the nation shut down, which caused a lot of marital problems, stress, financial security, and I was not at my best. Let's just say it. I was not at my best. And so I have to do this work if I am to stay sober and stay relatively sane. So I jumped into a home group, started sponsoring a few guys. I've since sponsored a couple more in that area. And it's really, kept me going. It sets me right. When all else fails, work with another man saves the day. Because I've had to go through just a lot of struggles. Even just losing my wife to a divorce and just madness. It's been very colorful. But I remember thinking back to Bill's story. He'd be hit with waves of depression, and he would go back to back to Towns Hospital and speak with new men there, and he felt amazingly uplifted. So that's why I try and speak whenever I can and sponsor guys and be an active member of my home group. So I should probably shut up there. If anyone's thinking about doing this work, maybe you're here, you haven't started, I would highly recommend it. It's done wonders in my life. And if you are somewhere, along the journey, I recommend you just, continue. If you're reading, keep reading. If you're writing, keep writing. If you're trudging, keep trudging. That's all I got. God bless.